Mips.
What do you think, Mips?
Tony Riddle is aiming to run 900 miles barefoot from Land's End to John O'Groats in support of our natural world. And that's not all, because he's hoping to pick up rubbish along the way.
This morning, it's smile for the last mile. Back in December 2018, I'd kind of come around from a deep meditation, almost like a ceremonial experience, and this pair of boots came up for me. It was a pair of boots, little leather boots with a bar that was running across them like a brace, and it took me into my birth. And so I was born one of the longest babies on record in Reading Hospital, and it meant that I'd taken on this crazy adaptation in the womb. There was no room in the womb, and I'd curled my feet up into my armpits. When I was born, I had this deformity, which meant being in plaster cast boots for a number of weeks that was changed regularly. And then beyond that, I was given then a pair of boots with a brace. So that's kind of my first experience. And underneath that, I had this message of lose the shoes. And so I ran through to Katerina. I said, oh, you know, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. She looked at me and said, wow, what's he talking about? And it was, I'm going to run, Katerina. I'm going to run from Land's End to John O'Groats. She looked at me like, Land's End to John O'Groats? Well, firstly, not really understanding what that meant. And so I had to go a bit deeper. That meant running 900 miles from the southern point to the northern tip of the UK. And so that gave Katerina another opportunity to look at me as if, is this guy mad? And so I started to then explain, like, this is how we're going to do it. And I'm going to break it down, Katerina, into 30-mile segments. So I'm going to run the 900 miles, 30 miles per day from the southern tip to the northern tip. But I'm also going to be doing this barefoot. I'm going to basically fully tune in, and it's an opportunity for me to unravel whatever trauma I felt was in there, an opportunity to lose the shoes. And then, you know, part of my coaching philosophy is that I have this belief that we're innately wild, connected, and empowered beings. So, and we're a running species, so this is something we should be able to do, right? So that was kind of the conversation, that was in the growth of it, in the seed, let's say. And then as we started to unravel it, it was like, okay, what am I doing also? What can we do with this? Because already I could see from the reaction Katerina had given me that it was like, wow moment. It was, you know, getting that socially extreme eyebrow raising behavior. And so I knew that then there was potential for something beyond what human potential was. This was like, okay, what's the bigger picture? And I'd already believed that running is beyond a physical experience for me. It's much deeper than that. So I make a spiritual connection to the earth when I'm barefoot, and when I'm out there for a long period of time, it's almost like a deep meditation. But, you know, if I can make a connection to the earth, what's the bigger picture? How do I make others connect to this run and connect to that bigger picture being the earth and the environment? So I thought, all right, I can basically interview sustainability experts along the way. That'd be fantastic. Imagine I set up an interview, you know, either every day. It would be incredible, and I could bring people in from all different fields around sustainability and the environment. So that's when the next cog was like, oh yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's do that. And it was like, okay, fundraising. How are we going to raise funds? You know. So then it was right. Okay, let's choose 6 organisations and charities. So I chose basically Care International, Client Earth, Extinction Rebellion, Greenpeace UK, Rainforest Alliance, and Surfers Against Sewerage. So I wanted to raise awareness through the interviews, but then raise funds and enable these incredible organisations to carry on doing their great work. You know, what better way of doing it? And it was basically to look at the plants, the rocks, and the animals, and that was the spiritual connection to the earth. So that was that in stage, and then, you know, then it was like, when are we going to do this? And it felt like August was just the wrong timing. Things really shut down for me at that time, and I felt that it would be good to take a bit of a break out. So September came up, and it was like, right, okay, there's 30 days in September, let's do it from the 1st until the 30th. So that's the timing of the run. So we're moving towards that now, and it's ticking away real fast right now, but I'm out there doing a fair bit of mileage. We're clocking up between 100 and 150 miles a week, depending on what the load is of the week. Back in December, of course, having that conversation with Katerina is different to the position we're in now. because we found out also we were pregnant in February. So we've got a boy coming into the world as well. So that's going to ramp things up because Katerina and the kids are also going to be joining me. So along the route, we're going to be, you know, they'll be joining me along the path, basically, getting the full hit of the UK as we go. And Katerina will be growing and growing because our due date's like in October when we return back. So there's plenty going on, as you can imagine, behind the scenes. So getting the mileage in at this stage, you know, it's one of those we have to work around. I'm a family man, I have a business, so but I think that adds to the story really, doesn't it? That we don't have to be this incredible endurance athlete. I think that underneath it, we are all endurance athletes anyway, so we must have been able to do that with that family unit behind us. So I think that's part of proving it as well, that I'm a family man and this is what I'm going to do. So there we are, that's the human potential. We're raising funds. Now it's just get out and do it, I guess. So the whole Riddle tribe, we make our way down to Cornwall and we've taken on an Airbnb. It's just outside Padstow. So it was already, there was that apprehension, it was already coming in even on the drive down to Cornwall. We had a really early night, we'd hit the beach, Constantine Bay, had some cold immersion, then got back, had some really amazing food, and then up super early, and the whole tribe, we all went down to Land's End. So James was there, of course, filming, doing his stuff, and then this Rebecca, who's also known as Barefoot Mallorca.
We found that river now, it's beautiful.
She was visiting, so she came and joined me for the first leg. So you could feel already, it was just in the air, and we met all these cyclists. They were just about to go off and do Land's End, John O'Groats, of course, and they were like, "You're doing what? You're going to run the whole thing barefoot? You're crazy, man." So that kind of conversation was already in there. And of course, all the Instagram selfies and things going off at the Land's End landmark before going off and looking at the distance that had to be covered. It was all still, even at that moment, still quite surreal. Is this really going to be happening? And then you see, then there's a sign for the start, and it's like, we're doing this. This is the start. So off Barefoot Mallorca and myself, we were off. We were just trotting away. And the first leg was to run into Penzance, and it was a beautiful run. It was so smooth. It was like probably everything I'd done, it's probably the easiest 10 miler. I think I was just ready to go. I needed to get it started and just believe that this was actually happening. And yeah, it all seemed to come together just even in that first 10 mile. And then we hit Penzance and we found this incredible outdoor pool that had been renovated. It's like a 50s style pool that they basically renovated. Beautiful. So that was a bit of cold immersion. Then we got some plant-based gains on the go, and then I was off again. And then it was like the realization that I'm doing this on my own because Barefoot Mallorca wasn't with me. So off and then trotted. We did another 10 miler and then completed that day. We did 30 miles. Straight back to where we were staying, again just outside Padstow, and into the recovery, so breathwork, mobility and an ice bath. And already I could feel, okay, I've definitely done 30 miles today, but woke up the next day ready to go again, and another day of just easing into it. And again, the realization, this is what I'm doing, this is what we're doing now. Day 3 hit, I think I did 20 miles, and then I had a podcast set up for Hugo Taghome from Surfers Against Sewerage, which I was super excited about. Been a big fan of what they're doing. And we shot a podcast. So we sat down, got behind the mics, did that, and then it was back on the road again for the final 10. And then it was kind of this realization of this is what we're doing, because with the mileage is one thing, you know, there's a physiological element to this. There's, as I've said, tuning into the environment, but then there's this mental impact of the podcast. So that was something I hadn't really factored in, is how tiring even holding a podcast would be. So we had that going on. But then day 4 hits, and again, back on the road, and feeling kind of like my mind and body halfway through that day had this conversation that, this is what we're doing. I feel, okay, I'm now feeling it. I feel that this is what we do. This is what we get up, and this is what we do day in, day out. And I'd heard this from others, that they'd done endurance events, that the mind and the body kind of just, this is what you do, and you accept. There's an acceptance, I guess, tuning in to that degree. And for me, it definitely felt like that. I had this saying that was that you trust the process, respect the process, be patient whilst in the process, and then when you finally understand that it's all process, you just be. And again, in that moment, I guess I fully understood this is be it. I'm being the run. I'm being this Land's End John O'Groats, lose the shoes, environmental sustainability. This is what I'm being. So in that moment, and then, bam, disaster hits.
Yeah, the foot update. So, what kind of came in right after the day, I said, I get it now. And felt like I'd just become the process. It was as if my mind and body had got together and had this conversation. It was like, okay, this is what we're doing now. We're doing this every day. And it kind of just, it was quite an epiphany at that time. And it kind of related to this thing I say about trusting the process, respecting the process, being patient whilst in the process until suddenly it all becomes process, right?
Day 7 in the cave, the pain cave.
And then you figure out, I am process. So I figured out that it's all process, of course, and now this is just the same process I have to get past. And that process started with a thorn that entered kind of the medial part of my heel, which then meant every time my foot kind of landed, it triggered something, so I was forced to go out laterally. And it's micro adjustments that I could feel happening. And then we did 3 days on that. So we did 3 days of trotting 30 miles a day, loading out a little, and of course, knowing what I know, the great toe, the big toe, is 4 times denser and thicker than all the other toes. The slimmest, least loading bone structures on the outside of the foot, so the 4th and 5th met heads, and that's where I was kind of loading. So lo and behold, what was I to expect? Yeah, my foot's swollen up like I joke because it felt like my toenails were going to pop off, but you can see kind of I've lost the form of an ankle now, so I have what I call a cankle, where the lower leg meets the ankle. It's really swollen up round here now. But that I still had been running, so I got my head around it in a way. But of course, like the compensation from going from the thorn to the lateral side of my foot, I'd been overcompensating then on my right side and probably recognising 70% of my weight most of the time. And what started to happen is that the pad underneath my foot started to become more and more sensitive. And with that sensitivity, it was pulling my big toe over. Again, another adaptation. The big toe is pulling over almost like a protection thing. The problem is when we lose the big toe, it stops the big toe from becoming a lever, this shape. So I started to roll in over and over again. So I'm starting to see all the symptoms I see people coming in with. It just started, the adaptation started to occur. So rather than that big toe be here and understanding this roll, I now adapted into this. And that wear over a 30-mile distance on probably some of the harshest tarmac I'd experienced so far has split the space between the first and second metatarsal heads. So it's like I have a tissue tear within it, which, I could deal with the left cankle and the swelling. That's not been a problem. It was just suddenly I cannot experience anything through the right side. Even to have my feet on carpet is quite sensitive. So, of course, that's compromised the whole 30-30 challenge in my mind. But that's the process, and the process is whatever throws in my way, I am that. So my challenge is to get from Land's End to John O'Groats, and whether that means upping my mileage towards the end, or shifting the whole timetable around, or moving an interview, but just to get the distance in, we will do it. that's where I'm at right now. So that's the update. Yeah, it was a sad moment this morning. I kind of found myself hobbling out of the car, getting to my normal stage of, okay, I'll do some squats and I'll do some jumps. And I just couldn't pull my feet off the floor to jump. It was like nothing would move off the ground. And in with that came this fear of, oh, fuck, I'm not going to be able to do this. And then it was a matter of, okay, let's get through the process. What can I be doing? And so tears came, roaring came, and then James pulled up in the car and went, "You okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got to go. We've got to go back. It's not happening today." So memorable day, probably just as memorable as any other day. More memorable than the first day, I guess, because I've got to go through that excitement, anticipation, and all those emotions to get me back out there to go and start the process again.
In all the interviews and podcasts leading up to this run, I'd never questioned the physiology or the technique. In fact, I just said if there was anything that was going to let the run down, if there's anything I was anxious about, that was it. How anxious was I about the run itself? And it always led to the logistics. And feeling that if anything was going to let me down, it would be that. There'll be, stuff, the variables that we have no control over, let's say. We were moving, the accommodation and the experiences, the conversations that were being set up and the workshops that we were looking to organise. So I'd never anticipated getting this thorn in my heel that would then, unfortunately, it was the physiology that then led to the logistics. It's quite interesting how that unravelled. And so simple things like even podcasts with, one of them in particular was Jasmine Hemsley and Nick Hopper. And so it was a sustainability talk with Jasmine. We wanted to cover sustainable fashion. We brought in so much in that conversation, but I was completely smashed. It was tough getting through the mileage because I picked up this thorn. So then getting into Taunton, I'd imagined already covering 30 miles, but we'd only had 20 miles in. So I then had to have 10 miles off the back of that conversation to complete, which meant it just kind of ate into the recovery. Then we then had a podcast set up with Sophie Hellier, and also Chris from We Move magazine came out with Sophie. So I'd completed, again, it was like 20 miles and we still had this 10 miles to complete. And that would take us into Bristol. And there was an Extinction Rebellion event going on there as well. Podcast was super smooth, it was quick, it was like a 20-minute podcast, but we smashed it. We got so much content in there. Sophie was great. Covered, again, so much content even around plastic periods and things like that I thought was really good content. And then we ran together, and this guy called Andy, he decided to meet up for the runs. He was running with us, which was great. And then it really felt like it brought the social experience back in for me. Up until then it felt quite lonely. And then off the back of that, it was, I think 2 days in, then I'm out of action. So it was then having to deal with the recovery. And then Richie Norton, we'd set up a conversation with Richie, and this is where suddenly the logistics were being thrown out, because that was meant to be, Richie was taking the time out of his diary, and he's a pretty busy guy, right, to come and meet me for what was going to be a run. We were going to run together and then get the mics out. So we ended up meeting in Shrewsbury and just had a conversation. There was no running, but it was a really lovely conversation, and also just really great of Richie, beautiful guy, just to come out, and he said, "Look, I'll just come out and give you a hug and we can have a chat." So that went down. And then we were approaching, it was a really important day in the diary, we were approaching Lola's birthday. So we'd set up at Wild and Wild Cafe to do a live podcast with Rongan Chatterjee. So Rongan had made his way over, he lives just very close to Chester. So we basically got the mics out and had a conversation about the vulnerability and how the run was suddenly, it could stop at any moment. It was like the adversity that I was facing. So that was a really deep conversation really with him. And then we closed that with, there's a very important person in the audience watching right now, and that was Lola. So I called Lola up. So she had a nice little birthday experience, which would have been, for her, it was like, yeah, but we're going to be on the road my whole birthday. And I had this plan that we'd have a cake there. So that was incredible, and it really worked out well. She had a lovely time. We got her up on the mic as well. And then the happy pair, David and Stephen. I love those two. I think they bring great energy, and I was just so blown away that they were going to come all the way over and join me for the run. And they'd anticipated running 30 miles with me. There was a few things that happened for them logistically. It comes down to logistics again, those variables. And they said I'd already completed 20 miles, but we ran for 10 miles together, which is a great run along a canal stretch as well. Again, in pieces, it was kind of, that was just getting back into the process of running again. And we met this incredible couple that come to join us. So that was a really memorable day that day. And we shot some great footage as well, and lots of banter. And also just explained to them about the vulnerability and the adversity. So it's just really nice to have three guys running together and just talking about what was the process really.
Hearing about the healing, the cathartic kind of nature of stripping back the layers and realising what's important in life and what's not.
Yeah.
And that bit's really
the
interesting.
opportunity to reflect and to remember what's important.
And I think back
Also,
to
shredding.
yeah, shredding,
Real
yes.
shredding.
But back to what you said, I think it's about embracing adversity, because through adversity you can't avoid but your true self. Like, you have to face your own shit.
Yeah.
The veneer disappears. You start to be more
And
honest.
the beauty of that is also that understanding that there's wisdom in that adversity.
Yeah.
We're also fearful of it, yet some of the most valuable lessons reside in it.
Yeah, very
You know, and that's where real change occurs.
That's brilliant.
And then it was back behind the mics. We didn't quite have time with those for the microphones and them, so we just recorded a bit of content in the car, that was it. And then Roger, so Roger Wright, great name that, Roger. Roger is a packing technologist. I'd never heard of a packing technologist before, but he's got like 20 years experience, and it blew my mind, this conversation, because it suddenly opened up, the thing about recycling and reusing.
The recycling is way down the hierarchy,
Yeah.
and so is compostable, really, because you really want to keep that material in the system if you can. So we're doing a lot of work to try and put recycled material into our products where we can, and customers are coming around to that as well.
Okay.
For example, we've removed the black food trays. I'm sure you don't eat microwave meals, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And those historically would have been black.
Yeah.
And they're very difficult to recycle. Not impossible, but very difficult. So most retailers now come out of black.
Yeah.
Waitrose, to their credit, have now said to customers, actually, it might be pink this tomorrow, it might be yellow the day after, it might be a different colour, basically, because we don't know necessarily what recyclate's coming into the system.
Oh, wow.
We just take whatever we can get, and you get a food tray. It's safe, it's clean, but it might be a different colour tomorrow.
It's just that's his field, and so there's some important stuff, I think, for people to listen to there about how we can sometimes feel that we're doing our best, but actually there's another answer. And what really struck me is Roger then wanted to run with me, and we completed that. We finished the next 10 miles with Roger, and then ran into Chester to get to the NICE Collective. So that's Arthur Paulines and Martin Petrus. And I'd always said that I wanted to put workshops on along the route, and this was one of the ones that came together. It worked out. We were going to do it more north, but just logistically, again, we were behind time at this stage. We still had some mileage to catch up on. And at very short notice, I think within 24 hours, we booked out a workshop at the Bodhi Tree yoga studio. We had like 18 people there, and so when I walked in the door, with Roger, I'd completed 30 miles and then into a workshop. Arthur took us through breath work, a little bit of flexibility work, and then we did an ice bath. And the nice surprise was that Tim Sheaf was there. So Tim had come out to join us. We then went out, we had a nice meal together, and just a bit of a mind dump really about what the experience had been up until that point. So that was quite nice, getting to process all of that, I guess. And then Tim met me the next day, so we did a trot, went out for a run. Tim whipped his shoes off for a part of the trot as well. And then we got behind the mic and we recorded some content really. So yeah, I think the experiences on the run of meeting people, not just these people I've mentioned, but people all the way along the route that would just come out, even just meet me for a photograph. It's kind of the social experience I talk about, which I think is also important. It can become quite uplifting, that, you know, and just to have, again, I guess it's understanding that the naivety, I think, coming into this, and the naivety being, well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and have expectations of it. And what I've learned through those experiences is just no expectations. I think that's key. So an interesting thing came up to me around time, or my perception of time. Really started to unravel on the run, how there would be people on the route, it would almost feel like they'd just been placed there at that moment, just the moment when I needed them the most. And through that came the word procrastination. It would work out on some of the mornings we'd leave super early. It could be like 5 a.m. And James and I'd be out the house and then on the road, and we'd get to the start point, and it might be, say, 6:30 or 7 a.m. and I'm just not ready to go. And I'd sit and I'd have tea and I'd have an energy ball or something, or a snack, or putting some tape on or something. I'd be there, what I would say, procrastinating at that moment, or what I thought was procrastination. But then one particular day, when it taken me like an hour and a half to get out the car, and I could see James like looking at his watch and thinking, how are we going to get the mileage in today? And then I finally decided, right, okay, I'm ready to go. And off I went. But I walked, and I was walking for what must be 200 meters, and I meet this farmer, and the farmer was called John. And he's just out to take his dog for a walk. And we chatted, and it turned out that he'd lived in London, he was ex-military, so this whole conversation was unraveling. And then he said, where are you going? I said, well, to be honest, I only really know these 10-mile coordinates. That was enabling me to be present again. And so he said, well, where are you going? Where are you heading? Let's see. So I showed him on Google Maps where we're heading, where I'm heading. And he said, well, just 9 miles up, you'll find there's a Tibetan monastery. You should go to that. And I was like, wow, there's a Tibetan monastery. I mean, if I'd not met John at that moment, then there would be no Tibetan monastery. And it turned out it was quite a profound space. It was like in the middle of nowhere, this monastery. So that was one instant. I think that was what really made me look at time differently. It's like in that moment, he was meant to be there. Had I left an hour before, when really we were all frustrated thinking, when's Tony going to get on the road, I wouldn't have met him. But then it made me look at different things along the route and how they were unraveling. There was this couple called John and Holly. And John and Holly had come out to meet us on the day that the Happy Pair were over. So they were really excited. They'd been running up and down this canal path for like 2 hours. The Happy Pair were late coming in, so I'd already clocked up 20 miles by the time they met me. And then we had 10 miles to run together, and we were approaching the end. Beautiful canal route underneath all the bridges and seeing all the longboats. And we suddenly see this couple waving their arms, hey, and then we meet. And there's just this brief conversation, and we're taking selfies and then hugging, and then they described to us how they've been looking for us for these 2 hours, and they literally were just about to give up. But then they found James's camera up on a bridge. And then James was looking a bit sheepish that day about his camera. And then we hugged and we embraced. There was a bit of inappropriate banter about the bridge that we were standing by, as it had number 69 above it. And then we departed. But it was the next day, Holly had then sent me an email to say, I just want to explain how I think there's a bigger purpose here, that you're being looked after, and this is how I think that. Her mum, when she was dying of a brain tumour, went to see a shaman. And the shaman had explained that her mother's spirit guide was a heron. So whenever they see a heron, they always pay close attention. So on that day, that particular day, 2 hours have gone by that they're searching for us. They've just literally given up. That's it, we're going. A heron flies up past the bridge. And it's that bridge where they find James's camera. But that's not it. We're then, when we meet them, we're standing by a bridge which was number 69. Her mum's born in 1969. Her mum's name is Wendy. And the boat that came from beneath the bridge when we're standing there at number 69, the boat was called Wendy Woo. And her mum's name isn't just Wendy. Her friends nicknamed her Wendy Woo. I mean, how powerful is that? So it just, again, it was so many stories like that unraveling where people just seem to be where they were meant to be at any given moment. I'm going to say moment because it completely changed my perception of time.
On day 23, James and I had arrived back early. It's like one of those days when, again, so we started at exactly the same time, but we arrived back really early. All the same mileage was done, everything was the same, aligned the same, brakes felt like they were the same. Tempo, rhythm, mileage felt the same, but it just happened we arrived back early. But Catherine and the girls were out, and I arrived back and Lola had left me this incredible letter, which I'm going to read now. So, to Papa, there's something I need to tell you. When you run, remember this. You're as brave as a caveman. And you can sometimes be a bit of a grizzly bear.
But you can also be as gentle as a butterfly. You're as fast as a cheetah and as slow as a sloth, and as loving as a mother bird. But you are the best papa in the world to all of us. We love you. Remember all of this.
Which was incredible. And it was an incredible moment as well. It's stuff like that that just along the path just helps feed the soul. And it's again perception shifting, you know.
Okay, so I wrote that when we were staying in a Victorian house, and I wrote it because, well, I'd actually been meaning to write it for a long amount of time.
She's right. There's moments when I have been a bit of a grizzly bear, but also they need to see all of that. I thought it was very important what they've suddenly seen, which I haven't really shown them, of course, because I don't think I'd even accessed it. I think on this journey I've managed to rewild my vulnerability, which I hadn't had before. I think that maybe the military kind of background kind of squashed that, but suddenly it was okay to show vulnerability. It was okay to be vulnerable in a moment when you're completely broken, of course.
I did feel pretty sorry for him, and I sort of thought he would give up then. I was a bit worried that it would be the end of the run. So there was actually a point where we saw him crying on the bed, and at that moment I was worried, oh no, is he going to quit? That's why I asked him, Papa, are you going to quit? Because I was really sort of worried, you know. But when he got over it, I knew, okay, he's gonna do it now.
And everyone needs to see that. Otherwise, what would this note being to Papa, you're just superhuman. But actually, this is demonstrating that there's multiple. We have a multifaceted kind of character, personality, and emotions. So I think that really highlighted that.
It's important for them to see that their papa is human, you know, more than anything. That's the most important thing I can give them. Like they've never seen me cry before. Millie saw me crying. I had my head in my hands in the bedroom, and so they got to see vulnerability. That's so important, right? They get to see, Papa's human. He's vulnerable. Lola said, "You're not going to quit, are you, Papa?" You know. So I got to hear all of it. I think Lola taps into the emotion of it because they view it on more of an emotional level than we do. That you're not going to quit, are you? In other words, she knows I'm not going to quit. You know, that's why she's asking. I felt in that moment, and yeah, I think I can be the best example of a human being just by my behaviour. You know, so if that means I cry, if that means I yell, if that means it's whatever is in that moment, and they're witness to it, they're witnessing something amazing. This is an amazing experience for them to see. You know, what's unraveling here, and how I can come through that adversity. I remember this day had come when I'd hit the big sign for Scotland. You arrived in Scotland, and it was just Scotland. So much came to me at that moment. You know, as we progressed day by day, higher and higher into Scotland, I just felt I was getting this feeling of I was stripping back what wasn't needed or serving the process. So physically and mentally, whatever had to go was going. in order for me to carry on day by day. And at one point I remember posting or blogging about the fact I had goosebumps. I was running through this forest, I could see the trees moving, and I had goosebumps as if my ancestors were with me, actually running with me. And every now and then I'd get this tap on the shoulder, and it was as if a wise uncle was just passing wisdom, just profound insights along the route. And at one stage, I remember feeling like my grandfather was there. My grandfather was on my shoulder, and we're running together, and he just said, look, well, Tony, you know, you didn't think we were going to make it that easy for you. You know, you have to really work for this. If you really want something, you really have to work for it. But it doesn't mean it's not going to come without its rewards. And as the word rewards kicked in, I looked up and over, and this huge rainbow just appeared, and it was absolutely insane, but complete profundity, really, in that moment. And then throughout that day, that was like day 29, so that was a 47 miler. It was probably one of my best days for running. It was the best day. Everything just came together, despite the fact I was running on a sprained ankle, I was hobbling along, but just, again, it was just, you realise in those moments that we're really not alone. We're really not alone. We think we are. Messages were coming in of, don't you feel lonely? And it's like, no, because if we really tune in and we understand it, that our ancestors are always with us. That's the point. But I think we're almost so distracted from being present these days that we really don't pick up on those little nudges from the ancestors. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I think it was just for me, the learning in Scotland was just way beyond what I'd imagined. Just beautiful, beautiful experience, really. The day 27 hit, and day 27 for me was what the whole process was about, it felt like. Everything I'd done up until this point, almost in my whole existence, had been about this one day. I'd woken up, I couldn't load my left foot, I had an upper ankle sprain, and I was deep in the cave, in the pain cave that I call it. You know, I had to go in deep, right to the back of the cave, and I'd sit there and I'd have to go through all these different processes. And luckily, James and Katerina and the girls went out to see Loch Ness, and I just had the whole day there. And it started very much like my head in my hands, sobbing to start with, and just accepting that that's what it was. That was the vulnerability, and I had to just surrender to it, whatever it meant. And I knew from all the tools I had in place that I could get out. I knew I could get out the pain cave. I just had to switch my perception from being a broken, injured Tony who's frustrated at the world because he thinks he's just got 3 days to go and this is the end of it all, into healing, warrior almost language of, I know I can do this. I have everything in me to do this. And it was really helped along because I had messages coming in from, say, David and Steve and the Happy Pair sent me some really incredible messages. Justin Caffrey, I mean, my God, that guy just really boosted me up.
Step in front of the next step, in front of the next step. Don't move away from one foot in front of the other. Keep your focus on the simple movements. Remember to relieve your ankles.
Just gave you this message that, you know, you're the minority of the minority of the minority, and you have everything in you. And then Rich Roll sent me a beautiful message again about, you know, the process and that I have everything in me.
You have visioned this, you have prepared for this, and you are capable, my friend, of completing this.
And it's all been about this moment, really. So again, just messages like that helped. That was the initial charge of it. And then taking it back to my practices that, you know, I always talk about the saviours being breath work, meditation, and ice baths. And with the breath work, it just enabled me to just change the frequency. The ice, again, was just helping, obviously, on a physiological level, but again, giving me that extra boost of adversity to help me snap out of it again. And then the meditation, I talk about the pain cave, what does it mean? And it's, I can go into the back of the cave and there's a very wise bear that sits at the back of this cave. and there's a log there. He's sitting on a log, and I go up and I sit next to the pain cave and sit next to the bear in the back of the cave. And the conversation with him was very much like, you have everything in you again. You're much stronger than I am. And he tells me that, you know, you have a choice. You know, you're much more powerful than me. You have the choice. You have the choice to remain at the back of the cave, or you have the choice to step out into the light again. Whereas I'm just stuck back here, the bear at the back of the cave. And that was the start. That's what I felt was, oh my God, I managed to switch my perception and I can now go do this. And off the back of that, from the adversity to finding something at the back of that cave, I managed to go out and do 30 miles, then 47 miles, and then on the very last day, 57 miles. And if anything, it's just demonstrated again the human potential and the body being this vessel for the mind, that if we surrender to being the victim, of course we remain as the victim, but if we really just go into the language of healing and being powerful, oh wow, who knows what that human potential is, you know? But I think you need the pain cave, the adversity, to be able to access that. That's what came out of it for me. And that for me is a very powerful message.
Oh yeah, day 29. That feels good, baby. Inverness. So at 8 a.m. there's a 60% risk of rain. And 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. So there's a fair bit of rain around today. I'll walk for a bit, get the actions in. Yeah. I'll get a little bit more food on board now.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
All right. Good luck. See you in a bit.
If the process means that it finishes today, it finishes today. But we continue and we just surrender to it. And by doing that, I managed to continue and did 30 miles and then 47 miles the next day. And then finished on a whopping 57 miles. To look at from the outside, I was like, wow, it's completely crazy. But then I'd realised that everything that had happened up until that point got me through those last 100-something miles.
Crazy mofos. Woo! We're going mining. 41 done for today so far.
Okay, we're done then, yeah?
Yeah.
Get cracking.
Post-trot squats. Essential. One more day. One more day. Then what? What am I going to do with myself each day? Oh, what a place to finish though. I mean, it's beautiful here. These waves of emotions again today, just tearing through me, you know?
Day 30. Booking flights. Be picking bits out for the next year. That one's quite sore. Really prominent spot as well. It's can't bear to dig it out at the moment. Just grin and bear it every day.
Last 10, man. Last 10. Nearly there. 2 more hours. 2 more hours of. Did it, darling.
Jesus.
We did it.
You're so cold and steamy.